Aloha, this is Jason from Lahaina Music. We've had some requests for a lesson on how to choose which fingers to play, which fingers to use for playing chords. So for example, let's talk basics first of all. You want to line up as a general rule for a basic chord your fingers in this position. First finger in the first fret, second finger in the second fret, third finger in the third fret, fourth finger in the fourth fret. From this position you can play lots and lots and lots of chords, and the first rule of chord fingering is if it's in the first fret, use your first finger. For example, the C7 chord or the A7 chord, these are both following the first rule. First finger in the first fret. The second finger in the second fret, for example the A minor chord, this is still following the first rule because our finger just lined up my fingers, or C major 7, like that. I'm still following the first rule. In other words, first finger in first fret, second finger in second fret, third finger in third fret. For the C chord, still following the first rule. What if I have a two-finger chord? If I can follow the first rule, I do. For example, F, first finger in the first fret, second finger in the second fret. Or B flat minor 7. I've got three fingers now. I'm still following the first rule though. First finger in the first fret, second finger in the second fret, third finger in the third fret. If I move this whole thing up, I'm still considered to be following the first rule because it's still just lining up your fingers. I'm just moving to a different position, but I'm still lining up fingers. This is a B7, this is an E minor. This is still following the first rule of chord fingering. We haven't needed to add a new rule to figure out which finger to use yet. Second rule of chord fingering comes up when you have two fingers in the same fret space. How are we going to get around that? G6, for example. Best way to finger a G6, not the only way, but the best way, is to use your middle finger over your ring finger. Why is that the best way, as opposed to doing this, for example? The reason why is if we do it like this, it'll work, you can do it, but it has a disadvantage, and the disadvantage is that my middle finger is now bunched up way below where it has no leverage, and my first finger is sort of reaching, straining up to get higher than it otherwise might need to be. If I did it this way instead, this is a lot less strain on my hand because now my middle finger, which is longer, is reaching up farther, so it's easier on my hand. It takes maybe 1/5 the total hand strength or muscles to do this than it is to do this. So a lot of people think this is easier in the beginning because you're using stronger fingers, but eventually you're going to need to coordinate this finger anyway, your ring finger. So you might as well just learn it like this right off the bat. So this is now the second rule, and that is when you have two fingers in the same fret space, you can't follow the first rule anymore. We need a second rule, and the rule is your middle finger goes up higher than your ring finger. So this follows the rule G7. This is following now the first rule and the second rule together. They're not in conflict. This one follows the first rule. These two fingers follow the second rule. You play them together. You've got G7. If you take all these three fingers and move them up here, F sharp minor, still following the first two rules. This finger is following the first rule, first finger, first fret, and these two are following the second rule, middle finger over the ring finger. That solves a lot of conflict in your chords, but not all of the conflict in your chords. Sometimes you'll end up with something where you cannot follow the first two rules, and in that case you get the third rule. And the third rule is do whatever you gotta do. Here's an example. B flat. This is the closest I can do to following the first two rules. In this case I could have played a B flat like this, but that's now putting unnecessary strain on my hand because the pinky finger would be going up so high, my short finger, the pinky finger, going up over the other fingers. That's not comfortable, it's undesirable. It's not impossible, but it's undesirable. So B flat's played like this because it's the closest thing we can do to line up our fingers, 1, 2, 3. But it's kind of an exception because I got to hold down two fingers on the B flat. The G chord, lots of people think of this as a beginning chord. Lots of people teach it as a beginning chord, but this is a chord that's just filled with exceptions. This is not following the first rule or the second rule. This is whatever needs to happen. The best way to play a G chord, really, if you like from a classical guitar point of view, is probably to do it like this. So in this case, these would be following the second rule, right? Middle finger over the ring finger. And this would be, if you've got your pinky coordinated, this is the ideal way to play a G chord. Plus you can move it by adding your first finger on the top string. But most people don't do that. You could. If you know how to do it, it's a great advantage. Most people don't play a G like this because they don't have their pinky coordinated and strong enough to do that yet. So they'll play it like this. But this is an exception. This is whatever you got to do it. Why don't you do it like this? Because as soon as you do this, now you want to try to avoid twisting your wrist this way as much as you can. So instead of, we do this instead of this, because this puts a lot more strain on our forearm. Your forearm has two bones in it. You already know this, but maybe you never thought of this. Your hand is most natural when it's down at your side, or when you put it out to shake somebody's hand, for example. As soon as you twist your arm like this, backwards, now you've got all the muscles and the tendons and the ligaments, everything all curled up inside here, and you're trying to move your fingers and they don't want to move. It's harder to do that. So you want to orient your arm as much as you can in this position, more or less straight up and down. And these chords, you can play chords and not move your arm as much as you might think you need to. There are exceptions, of course. Sometimes you got to pivot out to here for an E minor, for example. For the B flat, you need to come, instead of having the ukulele resting kind of in plane, like, how am I going to show this angle, like this? On a B flat, you need to come forward a little bit just geometrically to get your fingers in there. So that's a little bit of an exception there in hand position, but not fingering necessarily. You're still just trying to follow the general guidelines of the fingering. When you get a chord, what about this chord? This is in the anything, whatever you got to do to get it done category. This is rule number 3, because you can't follow cleanly just rule number 1 and 2. Don't sort it out for you, then rule 3, whatever goes. Bar chords up here. They have some different rules for bar chords. Essentially, you use the bar, and then as much as you can, you would try to follow the other rules as much as you can on the bar chords. But I think most of the questions have to do with, well, how do I know which finger to use on a C chord? And the answer is you use your third finger because it's in the 3rd fret. That's rule number 1, right? Because you line up your fingers, 1, 2, 3, 4. Which finger do you need to play it? The one that's in the 3rd fret. There it is. 3rd finger, 3rd fret. So that's the first rule. Which finger do we use to play A minor? That would be our 2nd finger. Why? Because it's in the 2nd fret. So we use our 2nd finger. So this is still following the first rule of fingering. And if you think of all your chords, any new chord you might learn, if you think of it in that sense,